This is Conversation of the Birds, a story set to music. New chapters released weekly. Written, composed, and read by Jamie Holcomb. Saying that something is not really the same as believing in something yourself. But naturally, there are threats to your life lurking everywhere. Draw. They sheltered on a rocky outcropping, battered by restless waves. Although the shore behind them was still visible at this distance, it was not yet midday. The journey was already underway. "It's far," the elder booby said to the hoopa and the ibis. "The winds are pretty fierce, but this time of year it's mild compared to what comes later on." The hoopa said, "Will we make it to land before nightfall?" "In the end," said the elder booby. "In the end," said the elder booby, "you'll make it somewhere." He looked up at the bright-lit, clear sky. "Northeast," he said. A breeze ruffled their heads, like a light padding by some great entity, and don't think I'm trying to pull one over on you. That's just how it looked and felt, as that phantom force engaged with the trio of birds there on the edge of that rough, battered outcropping. The elder booby turned back now to consider the birds, the travelers assembled around the rock among the chattering seabirds. "Got a few swimmers among you," the old-timer mused. He looked over the hoopa himself, and then he sighed discontent. "Not sure you all can make it without stopping." "A lot." He called over his son, that funny fellow who had shown the birds the way to their present bastion, and the two seasoned swimmers bent their heads in deep conversation. The old man had shown his son since birth every inch of these waters. They knew where every jut of rock lay hidden. "It'll be a corkscrew," the old man said. "That is, you'll have to follow the way the rocks have laid out for you. No straight shot. But he can show you how to do it," and smirking, the old fellow indicated his bright young son, who was fervently bobbing his head. Together the birds determined that the albatross should take the lead, followed by the other birds who were used to navigating the water. "Big ones shield small ones," said the heron. "Songbirds stick to our last hawk. Together we'll weather this weather no trouble." And a fierce gale challenged his courageous words. Regardless, the birds assembled into a strong wedge, with the albatross at its peak and the young booby flying ahead. Like that they moved, in the face of rough winds and roaring waves. They sheltered on a peak of jagged rock here, a sandy outcrop of slick stone there. As one slinking body, they bounded and pounced and curled around the rocks. "Well, this is working marvelously," said the hoopa, and he recalled their slipshod efforts earlier to fly between the peaks that had been buried in the mist. He spotted a piece of driftwood encrusted in the sand below him, and on this totem he banged his beak in case the charms of superstition really did enact their powers upon the oh-so-solid world. And it's worth noting that he did feel better, our pink leader, once he'd released that timid anxiety through the force of his beak into that piece of resilient nature. They flew onward, and the sun countered their path. While the birds took a tack northeasterly, the sun stood committed to its age-old course. Now the birds had heard many pieces of information that have been floating around the world in the rings of other songs. What melodies had the hoopa picked up about that shining star that reveals the world to us? On these deeper truths that pink bird mused, and in the tide of ideas his mind glided free, unbounded by earthly considerations. Out here above the waves, the hoopa contemplated the sun, the path of which the birds had just crossed. He rose. He seemed to rise. The hoopa soared in cloudland, and although the sun was behind him, its omnidirectional radiance spread golden beams before him. "Hello," the hoopa cried. There was not a noise of response, only the wind whistling about him and the ruffling of his own feathers. "I must have lost the flock below me," the hoopa said. Down he rocketed, following the curve of his nimble beak. He burst into a shroud, glowing and voluptuous. Nowhere did the clouds break. The ocean, the birds, and everything he had been given to experience had vanished. Instead, what the hoopa found was more cloud mass, and although he had been sparked by panic, those luscious hills were so soothing in their character, visually decadent, and so satisfying in their dewy breath, that even though he was lost in the rolling hills, the hoopa had to sigh satisfaction. "It's beautiful up here," the hoopa said, and someone did respond. A giggle resounded. All about him, the clouds were tickled. They seemed to grow together, that revolving mass of air and moisture. Now those white bodies filled out into one gorgeous figure. The hoopa recognized the swell of thighs, a curving bird body. Something motherly, soft and gentle ran through the rounding form. The hoopa stammered. "Hello," he called again, into that body of cloud about him. And with one last shimmer of gold, the cloud turned dark. With a simmering crack, a lightning bolt exploded into thunder. The hoopa stood strong, committed to his course, downward into that bruised body of cloud. There in the darkness, as the thunder subsided, a new laugh rumbled out of the unknown. "Hello," said the hoopa. Like that he appeared, slimy and gruesome, the monster's many nicks from the various talons and beak points he had challenged. Those red wounds were all infected, green seeping pus among his matted feathers. He resembled a reptile now. Even his twig-brittle legs had vanished into that carapace of mud and gore that sheathed his bird-like body. Only the wings betrayed him. They hovered there, the opposed cousins, the hoopa ready at an instant to dive, but unwilling to let the thing leave his gaze, and the monster, whole, smirking through his blood-stained beak. The hoopa spoke a single note. Why? The monster simply laughed, and all about them the thunder resounded. I'm not sure what to say, said the hoopa as the thunder rolled off into the distance. It seems that you and I were born opposed. I could never be what you've become. Dogs, said Hole, his voice cracked from disuse. What about them? They opposed our quest. They attacked us, the hoopa said. To protect their truth, said Hole. Their truth was a lie, the hoopa said. With a vicious grin, Hole said the word. Hole. That's not true, the hoopa cried. You won't convince me of that. And although he had much more to say to get his point across, he realized the truth about those words. Instead, the hoopa floated there in the cloud, facing his equal opposite for a moment of the most honest reflection. It seems, the hoopa said, brooding, that my beak may be as sharp as yours. He raised his head to counter that woodpecker's wild, murderous gaze, on guard. Yes, like it or not, by virtue of who he was, the hoopa bore the responsibility. He had started it. The quest was his. The story was his. It was me, he said softly. I turned you into this. And with those words, the entire world seemed to change. On guard, I said, the hoopa repeated. Hole maintained his smirk. You're a fool to challenge me, said the hoopa. I am on a quest after something true. You are challenging my efforts. You have sabotaged me more than once. In this world of endless conflict, someone's got to defend the truth. We are all, the woodpecker began, but the hoopa cut him off with one great yell. That's a goddamn lie, and that nimble bird rocketed straight at his dark opponent. In an explosion of pain, the hoopa returned to his senses. He found himself facing the ocean. He spun frantically, and it took him a moment to distinguish the figures about him from the cloudy sky and dark terrain, that wide black ocean rumbling beneath them. His flock was with him. Are you all right? Said the dove. The hoopa eyed the bright turquoise feet of the young booby, who presently dipped down. Altogether, the flock descended onto a peak of rock bursting from the wild waters, and there the hoopa could see, not too far off in the distance, that other shore shimmered. The dove still had her sable eye on him. He looked into that dewy black blossom, and this is what he said. All my life I've felt the presence of this weight. It was impossible for me to find its source. A heaviness had settled on my heart. Try as I might to lift it or ignore it, or even at times to battle that dark substance, nothing could alleviate it. I believe it is all the sadness that belongs to the creatures of the world, and it was given to me to bear. Maybe you think that sounds selfish, but it's how I've felt for some time now. That feeling is what led me to brood in that old citrus tree. I have decided to try, once and for all, to figure this problem out. Then you came, and you were kind to me. Although I still appreciate your gentle presence, that heaviness still weighs on me. He turned behind him now to see the entire flock, wind-blown and salt-licked. There were 60 jewels shining above the rock, the eyes of the 30 pilgrims. But of course I was not alone. The burden is not mine alone. It is all the sadness of the world, which means... A sudden rush of wind drowned out the hoopa's words, but he continued to speak. And even though all that the birds and bats could hear was the yawn of the ocean and the whistling of that great wind, everyone knew what that pink leader meant. It is a fact, he concluded. And among the listeners, the vulture, too, he felt with a heavy heart. This has been Conversation of the Birds, a story set to music, with new chapters released weekly. Written, composed, and read by Jamie Holcomb. Produced by Supermoon. Join us next week for our next installment. If you'd like to check out more from Supermoon, visit us on TikTok or at our website, gosupermoon.com. That's GOSUPERMOON.com. The quest continues next week.